Welcome to Big Ideas Made Simple. I'm Jess Weber, speaker, entrepreneur, and someone who has had some incredibly beautiful ideas during my lifetime. I've also had some extremely expensive ones. And the difference between those two categories almost always comes down to the same thing, which is exactly what I want to spend some time in today. So every episode, I take one big idea, strip it down to what actually matters, and hand it back to you as something you can use before we're done here. No fluff, no filler, just a thing. So let's get into it. Last episode, we talked about getting out of the thinking silo, about how you cannot think your way into momentum, and the only move that closes the gap between knowing and doing is contact with the real world. So it's a conversation with a safe person where you give yourself permission to be unfinished. And I want to tell you something funny about that episode. I took my own advice because if you've been listening along with me for a while, you'll realize that a lot of this is self talk, self discovery. And I went out after the last episode and started having conversations. One of which was with a dear friend and my business strategist, another with a fellow author and coach, and a third with a friend who works inside a large organization that I used to be in and has the same perspective I did of watching people get stuck through that organization. And it's so funny to me because all the ideas in those conversations kept landing in my brain and getting kind of mixed up and shaping each other in such a way that they help me complete this concept that I wanted to bring to you in this episode together more than any one did by itself. So, exactly what happened or what I told you would happen in episode 10 did happen to me in the last week. And I am not even the slightest bit ashamed to admit that. So, to before I totally dive in, I need to give credit where credit is due. And the first person that I have to give credit to is my friend Julia Berger of Core Peak Studios, who is a brilliant brand and marketing strategist. And she sent a newsletter a while back that started this concept or this thought pattern for me with the line that without strategy, vision becomes the source of more ideas rather than fewer. And so when I was filming an episode of the I Love Coaching podcast and interviewing fellow coach and author John Meese about his new upcoming book, Sold Out Coach, he made a statement about people who build for imaginary friends are not going to find success because imaginary friends only pay with imaginary money. And then I was having this conversation with my friend Sam, and he said the flip side of what I was thinking about today, which is tactics are not a strategy, in addition to the fact that vision is not a strategy. And so all of those people kind of shaped this idea that's been rolling around in my head since the last episode. And each one of them, and each one of them gave me a singular sentence, but all three were kind of pointing at this same gap that I really want to explore. So if you were paying attention in episode 10 and you took action on it, you hopefully had a conversation with someone and the language that you were using started to become a little bit clearer, or your idea became a little bit more tangible. But then I would venture to bet that idea that showed up then led to more ideas. And they're probably really good ones. They're aligned with where you're going. So it's now a course or an event, a community, a project, a pivot, a partnership, a keynote. It doesn't matter, but something else probably came from this, all pointing in that correct direction and feeling like they should be a yes. And so I know that because I'm guilty of that too, I need to stop you and caution you so you don't do what I have done more than once. I want you to slow down and not go build the website or spend 12 hours with your AI partner trying to come up with the perfect name or hire somebody online to create a logo for you. Or worst case scenario, have somebody create merch from that logo and that ChatGPT or Claude name that you spent 12 hours creating so that you could sell it on the website you just built. right? Because having a vision is not the same thing as having a strategy. And for my fast thinking friends, my high capacity humans who naturally see 10 steps downstream, a version of every idea before most people even finish a sentence, the vision is almost never the problem. Vision is what we do in our sleep with one hand tied behind our back, right? Strategy is what decides what part of the vision is allowed to be real right now. And without it, you'll get what Julia was describing. Vision becoming a source of far more ideas rather than fewer. And it'll turn into what John was warning against, building your offer or your infrastructure around imaginary futures. And then it gets to what Sam was saying about nothing adding up because a collection of tactics looks like momentum until you realize that there's no sequence underneath it. So, vision without strategy generates chaos, scatter, right? And tactics without strategy generate busy work. So, I want to spend some time in this episode today talking about what actually sits between those two things. Because I have receipts on what happens when you skip it, literally. Like there's merch on my desk from it. So, here's my reframe. And I need to be honest that it took two books connecting in my brain before it really clicked, which is, naturally how I work. We've already discussed that I read too much, but I don't apologize for that anymore. The first book is The One Thing by Gary Keller and Jay Papasan. And the central question of the book is this: what is the one thing that I can do such by doing it everything else becomes easier or unnecessary? For years, because I was actually in a role inside of Gary Keller's company, I heard this line time and time again, and yet I felt, ironically, like it was weaponized more than utilized in a way that helped people truly recognize why having a strategy matters more than having vision. The question is important. I mean, it's the right question, but I kept running into the same problem with it because I could create the list and narrow things down, and yet everything felt like, especially in the role that I was in at the time, everything qualified and everything felt urgent. Everything felt aligned, and I didn't know how to use that question against a field that looked all the same, all equal, all important. And I think that's why so many people in that organization struggled with that question and utilizing it as a filtering tool. Now I've had the opportunity to connect that question with a visual that I saw during a 90-day rapid transformation cohort led by Dr. Benjamin Hardy before he released his most recent book, The Science of Scaling. And that's kind of where this all cracked open for me. And so picture a vertical line bar chart. So lots of different lines, different heights, and imagine that all of those lines are your ideas, your priorities, your opportunities. So the course concept is one, the keynote's one, the community is one, the whatever the opportunity is one. There's big ones, there's little ones, and all of them are sitting there. And in our own mind, oftentimes we'll experience through urgency or energy or enthusiasm that they all feel like they're equal, they're on par, they're the same height and the same size. They feel flat and equally loud, and they all deserve to be bumped up to go first because every one of them is still in alignment with whatever your big idea, your vision is. So, Dr. Hardy's framework gives you 3 moves that change what you actually see when you look at this chart of vertical lines. So the first thing that he gives is what we call the floor. And the floor is your standards and your systems. They become those non-negotiable baselines for what qualifies to be on your list at all. And when the floor is low towards the bottom of all of those competing lines, it makes everything look equal, right? Every idea feels right, that it has alignment or potential, and it's hard to make a cut of any of them. That's probably why your list stays enormous and equally urgent, because you can't actually see at the top that some of them are taller and some of them are shorter. And his premise is that raising the floor is not about eliminating those ideas. First, it's about raising the threshold for what even earns your consideration right now. So, does this serve the thread, or does it have a clear path to an outcome? Does it require a version of me that I haven't even built yet, or can I execute from where I am today? Those questions become our floor, and when you raise them, a lot of those lines quietly disappear from view. So, the second piece of this image that he had is the frame. So, instead of a floor just being a straight horizontal line, you now have a rectangular frame. And that frame becomes your perspective. It is the window you are looking through where you evaluate what actually matters. And perspective, it turns out, changes everything about what you see. So when your frame is narrow, it makes, again, everything look bigger or equal. When you're standing too close to your own ideas, you are operating from the inside of the vision rather than stepping outside of it. Everything feels vitally important. And so the frame is what Julia, I felt like, was talking about when she said vision becomes the source of more ideas rather than fewer. And when the frame is too wide or too close or too shaped by your own enthusiasm for what could be rather than what is real right now. But when you can adjust that frame and get some distance, it allows you to create a lens that you're looking through. It gives you the opportunity, like I said in episode 10, to get a different vantage point, maybe from somebody else. So that honest conversation is the thing that can change where you are looking at all of your priorities. So when you adjust the frame, your perspective changes. You start to see what is actually tall versus what you just perceive to be tall because you were standing too close to it. And when the floor and the frame come in, and you've got perspective on both of those, then you have the ability to leverage the third thing, which is focus. And this is where that Gary Keller question was pointing, but it didn't fully explain it well enough for me until I had Dr. Hardy's sequence. So focus isn't your first move, it's the last one. You can't focus effectively on a flat field. You need the floor to remove what does not qualify, and you need the frame to see what is actually there before the focusing question becomes answerable. So, what is the one thing that I can do such by doing it, everything else becomes easier or necessary? That question is asking you to look from your floor through your frame and choose what is truly the highest thing and focus on that. It becomes that filtering idea that raises everything and adjusts it so you could actually see where you need to spend time and not just guess or wing it. Vision without a sequence really is just a generator, and tactics without sequence are just motion. The floor frame focus model is what turns them into strategy. So, what does this look like for you in practice? Because I always like to leave you with something that you can use before you close the episode. And so here's the move that I want you to take. Start by getting these ideas out of your head and into something external where you can see them all at once. Write them down on sticky notes or voice memo them into the notes app on your phone. Whiteboard them. I don't care, because they don't need to be organized yet. They just need to be out where you can view them and look at the whole playing field simultaneously. So this is your vertical line chart. These are all of those different things. Then I want you to raise your floor. So for each idea on the list, ask yourself, does this serve the thread that I've been building? Does it have a clear enough path to an outcome that I can actually describe what done looks like? And can I execute it from where I actually am right now with the resources and capacity that I have, not some imaginary future version of me who has more time, more money, or a bigger team? Everything that cannot answer yes to those three questions gets put aside for now. Not deleted, just not in the priorities list or the focus list for now. Then, once you've raised your floor, you can adjust your frame by taking what is left and looking at it from the outside of your own excitement for it. Whose lens would give you an honest picture of it? So, just like I said in that last episode, who can you go to that is not going to be as excited about the ideas the same way you are and can be your strategist who maybe asks the uncomfortable questions, or the friend who will tell you honestly what is actually there versus what you are hoping or wanting to be there. Even just putting a 24-hour pause between you and the list can change the way that you look at it differently. So, what still looks tall when you are not standing right next to it? And then, only then, is when you can get to your focus. So, run what remains through the focusing question. What is the one thing, such by doing it, that everything else becomes easier or unnecessary? Now your field is filtered and the question is answerable. Your focus can land somewhere real instead of somewhere you just hope is right. Another line that I picked up during my time in that organization was hope is not a strategy. And I think that's exceptionally fitting for this particular episode. Hope is not a strategy. So, when you've done all three things, write down the rest somewhere that you can return to. These ideas that did not make it are not wrong, but the timing on them is. So when you're further down the line, 3 months, 6 months, whatever, and you've done the top priorities well and you've focused, you can go back and look and consider, did these things actually need to be done, or did they get accomplished along the way without me even realizing it by my focus on the one thing? Your ability to sit there and evaluate will allow you to be far more strategic and therefore far more effective, not just efficient for the sake of efficiency through tactics or casting a bunch of imaginary futures. So, this tool truly allows you to be protected and not dilute your efforts. So keep in mind, floor, frame, and focus in that order every single time. And I'll tell you that I had to learn this the hard way. I mentioned briefly in the last episode something that I've done in the past that demonstrates exactly why you shouldn't always do what I've done, but you can learn from it. And the thing that I admit freely and yet cringe at every single time is that a few years ago, I built an entire brand called Your Boss Coach. BOSS stood for Building Operations Systems Successfully because I wanted to create a world that helped integrators and operations professionals, the people who make everything work from behind someone else's name, design a life they were proud of and could actually live in without feeling like they were always drowning. And I knew that language around systems and operations and success didn't always land with the audience. And so I thought that the acronym could just be a little bit clever and that anybody who's in that field recognizes that the ops person is usually the boss of everyone and everything in kind of a fun and memorable way. And so I was very bought into this acronym, felt it was so good. And the vision beneath it was real because it came from my years of working closely as one of these people and with so many of them. I felt I understood the problem because I had lived it, and none of that was wrong. But what was the problem was that I never ran any of it through the floor. My floor was, does this even feel aligned? And everything felt aligned because it came from the same genuine place. So the field was flat and everything qualified. I had courses drawn up and events and plans for group coaching. I had one-on-one clients. I had a website, a logo in progress. And even one of my other most lovely and talented friends had made me merch for this brand that had 3 clients, right? 6 months into it, I mentioned something about it to my husband, and he looked at me and said, "Well, that's dumb." And that blunt honesty didn't land well, I'll be honest. I mean, I had feelings about it. It did shock me long enough to have me pause and recognize that he was right. Not about the vision or even the problem that I wanted to solve, but it was enough to make me realize that I had built everything without ever adjusting my frame. So everything inside of it looked like the same height, and I never stepped outside it long enough to see which things were actually the right things versus the ones that just felt really right because I was next to them. And I never focused, right? I went from a very large, flat field of aligning ideas straight to execution on everything simultaneously. I was building for the imaginary future version of the business, and the one that existed complete and thriving in my vision before I had ever run a single one of those ideas through a floor or the frame. It hurts to admit it. And at the same time, it's what I've learned from that that has allowed me to create what I'm doing now. So Big Ideas Made Simple exists partially because of what I learned in that season. When I finally ran everything through the sequence, honestly, the answer was clear. It wasn't the courses or the events or the group program. It was I needed to build an audience, test language, refine ideas with real people and real conversations. And of and by doing that work, I realized that I wasn't even in alignment with my thread. And so my vision of helping people get connected with the knowledge, tools, and resources they need to live their most impactful life has never wavered. It never changed. But my floor, my frame, my focus, my priorities did, because the difference was I should never have had merch that existed, and I should have spent time testing the idea and creating a strategy for the growth of that that would have allowed me from the very beginning to audit it and recognize that it might have not been the right lane. So I literally wasted 6 months of time building on something that needed to be a sticky note that I crumbled up and tossed it into the trash. But because I was so ingrained in it and standing right next to those big ideas, I didn't ever let them get discussed or filtered. And it hurts, y'all. I mean, I really do. I literally keep a coaster on my desk with the Your Boss Coach logo on it as a constant reminder to myself of how important it is to have alignment in who you are and what you desire for yourself in service of the world, and having that filter to run everything through. So I share all of that just to say, please, in the next week, take whatever ideas are currently living inside your head, the ones that have been generated since you got clearer on your thread and started moving, and put them out where you can see them, all of them, and write them down somewhere external, not to judge them, just to lay them out there and set your field. And then raise your floor. Does each idea serve the thread? Is there alignment with it and your clear path to your outcome? Can you execute on it from where you're standing right now? And anything that isn't a yes on all of those goes on a separate list. Adjust your frame and look what is left on the list outside of your own enthusiasm for it. So put some distance between you and the list, whether it's through the honest perspective of someone you trust or even just time and a different mindset. And then go focus. Run those things that remain through Gary's question and adjust so that you can give the one thing your best energy and your clearest thinking and your most protected time. I want you to write the rest somewhere real, like not just a mental note, but a list you'll return to. Because again, this entire podcast episode is not about your vision being wrong. It's about timing and how those ideas sometimes need to wait and they need to be sequenced so that they can be the highest and best use of everything that you are. So I'll say something directly about what this is and it isn't. It's not shrinking from a vision or being less ambitious. The people who build the fastest are always the ones who go the deepest on the fewest things at any given time. Robert Kiyosaki is known for saying, follow one course until successful, focus, right? Vision gives you directics, tactics are the moves, but strategy is the sequence that decides what moves matter now and what ones you should wait on. Fast thinkers with big visions are not undone by a lack of ideas. They struggle with a floor that's too low, a frame that's too close, and a focus that never gets the chance to land somewhere real because the field was never filtered first. So, again, floor, frame, focus in that order. Your thread is too important to dilute across everything your vision can see. Please protect it with strategy and let the one right thing pull everything else forward. Now, that's it for today's episode of Big Ideas Made Simple. If this one landed for you, I genuinely hope it saved at least one person from ordering the merch before the floor gets raised. I would love to hear about it at bigideasmadesimple.com. Remember, that is where my newsletter lives and where everything else I'm building is taking shape and where you can connect with me directly. So every week, one idea worth sitting with straight to your inbox and nothing else. And if you know someone whose vision is running 6 steps ahead of their strategy right now, send this one to them. The right idea at the right time changes things. I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for listening.